The war had turned the planet Torvin 9 into a graveyard. Smoke rose from the scorched ground, and the air smelled of burning metal and blood. Captain Elias Vance stood among the ruins, gripping his rifle tightly as he scanned the battlefield. The fight between humanity and the Zyrex Dominion had been brutal, and today's battle had been no different. The enemy had retreated, but at what cost? His squad was gone. Some had been killed, others captured. He was alone now, stranded deep in enemy territory. His armor was cracked, and his left arm ached from a deep wound. But Elias had survived worse. Survival was what he did best. As he moved carefully through the wreckage of war machines and fallen soldiers, his boots crunched against shattered helmets and empty shell casings. He knew he had to leave before Zyrex patrols returned, but then he heard something. A sound, faint but distinct. A whisper. Elias raised his rifle and followed the noise. He moved past a burning vehicle, stepping over a broken drone. Then he saw her. Lying among the wreckage was a woman, but she wasn't human. Her body was covered in a thin, silver-like armor that seemed almost organic, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her skin was a soft shade of violet. Her dark hair spread around her like a shadow. Her face, though alien, had human-like features, sharp cheekbones, full lips, and a pair of eyes that flickered open as he approached. What shocked him the most, however, was what she said. Elias Vance. Elias froze, his finger hovering over the trigger. How did she know his name? Was she an enemy spy? Some kind of trick. She tried to sit up, but pain racked her body. Her breath was shallow, her limbs weak. Elias could see that she was injured, badly. Blood, a strange silver-blue color, stained her armor. She wouldn't last long without help. "Who are you?" he demanded. She opened her mouth to speak, but then her body trembled. Her eyes fluttered shut, and she collapsed. Elias cursed under his breath. He should leave. He should turn around and forget he ever saw her. But he didn't. Something about her felt different. She wasn't Zyrex. He had fought the Zyrex for years, and they looked nothing like this. And the way she had spoken his name, it wasn't just recognition. It was as if she had been searching for him. He glanced around. The battlefield was eerily silent. If the Zyrex came back and found her, they would either kill her or take her prisoner. Either way, she was as good as dead. Elias sighed. He was going to regret this. Moving quickly, he slung his rifle over his shoulder and knelt beside her. Her breathing was uneven, but she was still alive. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her armor strangely warm to the touch. He looked up at the dark sky. His old outpost was miles away, hidden in the dense jungle beyond the hills. It wouldn't be easy carrying her there, but he didn't have a choice. As he started walking, a strange feeling settled in his chest. He didn't know who this woman was or why she knew his name. But one thing was certain. His life was about to change forever. Elias moved quickly through the dense jungle, the alien woman cradled in his arms. His armor was heavy, his body sore from battle. But he kept going. The hidden outpost was still miles away, and carrying her wasn't easy. She was lighter than he expected, but the rough terrain made every step difficult. The jungle was alive with sounds, strange creatures moving in the trees, distant explosions echoing across the land. The war wasn't over. The Zyrex could still be nearby. He had to be careful. As he walked, he glanced down at the woman. Who was she? Her skin had a soft glow, her silver-blue blood still staining her strange armor. Her breathing was steady, but she hadn't woken up since she collapsed. Elias couldn't stop thinking about how she knew his name. No one outside of his squad should know him, and yet this alien woman had spoken his name like she had known him for years. Why? After an hour of walking, Elias reached a small, hidden cave. 'Twasn't much, but it would be safe for now. He laid her down on a flat surface and checked her injuries. The wound on her side was deep, but strangely, her body was already healing. The bleeding had almost stopped. That's not normal, Elias muttered. He removed a small medkit from his belt, cleaning off the remaining blood. As he worked, she suddenly stirred, her breathing changed, her fingers twitching slightly. Then her eyes opened. Elias took a step back, gripping his rifle just in case. Her gaze was sharp and focused, as if she had been awake the whole time. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a soft but steady voice, she said, "You saved me." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Yeah. Now maybe you can tell me why the hell you know my name." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowly sat up, wincing slightly from the pain. "My name is Cirrus," she finally said. "I have been looking for you, Elias Vance." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. "Looking for me?" Cirrus nodded. "You are important, more important than you realize." Elias let out a dry laugh. "I'm just a soldier. Nothing special." Cirrus shook her head. "No, you are more than that." She hesitated, then looked into his eyes. "You are the key to ending this war." Elias frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The Zyrex have been fighting us for years. We're barely surviving." Cirrus took a deep breath. "The war is not what you think. The Zyrex are not just fighting for control. They are hiding something. They fear what humanity could become." Elias didn't know how to respond. This was insane. "Why should I believe you?" Cirrus reached out and gently touched his wrist. The moment she did, a strange warmth spread through his body. For a second, images flashed in his mind. Distant stars, ancient ruins, something vast and powerful buried deep within the universe. Then, just as quickly as it started, the vision vanished. Elias stumbled back, his breath heavy. What was that?" he asked, shaken. Cirrus lowered her hand. "A glimpse of the truth. You are not just a soldier, Elias. You are part of something much greater." Elias clenched his fists. This was too much. He had just fought a battle, lost his squad, and now some alien woman was telling him he was part of some big secret. It didn't make sense. Before he could say more, a sudden noise outside made them both freeze. Footsteps. Elias grabbed his rifle and moved to the entrance of the cave. He peered outside and his heart sank. Zyrex soldiers, at least 4 of them, moving through the jungle with weapons drawn. They were searching for something, or someone. "They're looking for you," Elias whispered. Cirrus tensed. "They cannot take me. If they do, everything will be lost." Elias had 2 choices. He could leave her behind, let the Zyrex take her, and get out of here alive. Or he could fight. He exhaled slowly, gripping his rifle tighter. He had made his decision. Turning to Cirrus, he whispered, "Stay quiet. I'll handle this." And with that, he disappeared into the jungle, ready for battle. Elias crouched behind a thick tree, his rifle steady in his hands. The Zyrex soldiers moved carefully through the jungle, their glowing red visors scanning the area. Their weapons were sleek and deadly, designed to kill in an instant. 4 enemies, trained, dangerous, searching for Cirrus. Elias had fought the Zyrex for years, but this was different. They weren't moving like normal patrols. They knew she was here. A metallic voice echoed through the jungle. "Search the area. The target is close." Elias's jaw tightened. Target. They weren't talking about him. They wanted Cirrus. For a brief moment, he considered his options. He could leave her, let the Zyrex take her. He barely knew her, and she had already brought him more trouble than he needed. But then he remembered the way she had spoken his name, the strange vision she had shown him, the fear in her voice when she said the Zyrex must not capture her. No, he couldn't leave her behind. Elias took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had to fight. The first soldier passed dangerously close to his hiding spot. Elias moved fast, wrapping his arm around the Zyrex's neck and pulling him back. Before the enemy could react, Elias drove his combat knife into the weak spot of the armor. The soldier shuddered, then collapsed silently to the ground. 1 down, 3 to go. The other Xerx heard something and turned sharply. Did you hear that? Elias quickly dragged the body into the shadows and gripped his rifle. The enemy spread out, moving cautiously now. Elias knew he couldn't take them all head-on. He needed a distraction. He pulled a small shock grenade from his belt, set a 3-second timer, and tossed it toward a nearby bush. Tick, tick, boom. The grenade exploded in a bright flash of blue light. The Xerx turned sharply, raising their weapons. Over there. While they were distracted, Elias struck again. He fired 2 quick shots. One soldier dropped instantly. The second spun around, but Elias was faster. He lunged forward, slamming the butt of his rifle into the enemy's helmet. The Xerx stumbled, and Elias finished him with a clean shot. 3 down, 1 left. The last soldier spotted him. Human detected. The Xerx raised its weapon, but before it could fire, a sudden pulse of energy surged through the air. A bright silver wave struck the Xerx, sending it flying backward. It crashed into a tree and slumped over, motionless. Elias turned sharply. Cirrus was standing at the cave entrance. Her hands were glowing faintly, the strange energy fading from her fingertips. She looked at Elias, her expression unreadable. You didn't have to do that, Elias muttered. Cirrus walked closer, her violet eyes studying him. You saved me first. Elias sighed, checking his rifle. We need to leave. More will come. Cirrus nodded. Yes, but there's something you must know. Elias gave her a wary look. Now, you want to talk now. Cirrus stepped closer. The Xerx. They're not just fighting this war to win. They are afraid of something. Something connected to humanity. Elias frowned. Afraid of what? Cirrus hesitated, then placed her hand on his shoulder. You. Elias stiffened. Me. Cirrus nodded. Not just you. All humans. The Xerx have spent years trying to keep your kind weak. But they know the truth. Humans were never meant to be just soldiers. You were meant for something more. Elias didn't understand. That makes no sense. We've been fighting the Xerx for years, barely surviving. Cirrus's voice softened. Because they made it that way. They feared what would happen if humanity reached its full potential. Elias ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. So what? You're saying we have some kind of hidden power? Cirrus looked at him carefully. Not power. A forgotten past. Before Elias could question her further, a sudden roar echoed in the distance. More Xerx were coming. Cirrus's expression hardened. We need to leave. Now. Elias nodded. Too many questions, too little time. He didn't know if he believed Cirrus, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let the Xerx get to her. Without another word, they disappeared into the jungle, hunted from all sides. Elias moved swiftly through the dense jungle, his boots crunching against the damp earth. Cirrus followed close behind, her movements unnaturally silent despite her injuries. The night was dark, the twin moons of Torvin 9 casting only a faint glow through the thick canopy. Behind them, the distant sound of Xerx patrols grew louder. They were searching, relentless in their pursuit. The hunt had begun. Elias gritted his teeth. He had been in bad situations before, but this was different. He wasn't just trying to survive. He was protecting someone. Someone who, according to her, held the key to a truth humanity had forgotten. But right now, that truth wouldn't matter if they were both captured or killed. We need to find a way off this planet, Elias muttered. Cirrus glanced at him. There is a way. Elias stopped, turning to her. You have a ship. Cirrus hesitated, then nodded. Not a ship, a beacon. If activated, it will call my people. Elias narrowed his eyes. Your people? You mean you're not the only one. There are others, Cirrus admitted, but they stay hidden. If the Xerx knew where they were, they would be destroyed. Elias ran a hand through his short, sweat-damp hair. More mysteries, more questions. He wasn't sure if he'd trust her, but he didn't have much of a choice. "Where is this beacon?" he asked. Ceres pointed toward the distant mountains, inside an ancient structure. "The Xerx do not go there." Elias frowned. "Why not?" Ceres hesitated before saying, "Because they fear what sleeps inside." A cold chill ran through Elias's spine. More secrets. But right now, survival came first. "Then we head for the mountains," he said firmly. "Let's move. The chase begins." They traveled for hours, moving through thick jungle, avoiding Xerx patrols at every turn. Elias's instincts kept them alive, choosing the right moments to hide, the right paths to take. Ceres moved with surprising endurance despite her injuries. She barely spoke, but when she did, it was always with purpose. Finally, as dawn began to break over the horizon, they'd reached a steep cliffside. Beyond it, in the valley below, lay the ruins of an ancient structure, dark, covered in vines, and forgotten by time. "There," Ceres said. "The beacon is inside." Elias studied the ruins. It looked like an old temple, its stone walls cracked and worn by age. Something about it felt wrong. Even from here, he could feel a strange energy pulsing from within. "You're sure this is safe?" Elias asked. Ceres's eyes darkened. "No, but it is necessary." Elias sighed. "Great, just once. I'd like an easy mission." They started climbing down the cliff, carefully making their way toward the ruins. But just as they reached the halfway point, a loud mechanical screech filled the air. Elias's eyes widened. Drones. Xerx attack drones. 3 of them shot out of the trees, their metallic bodies sleek and deadly. Red targeting lights locked onto them. "Run!" Elias shouted. Ceres didn't hesitate. They leaped down the last part of the cliff, rolling as they hit the ground. The drones opened fire, blue plasma bolts scorching the earth behind them. Elias pulled out his rifle and fired back, hitting one drone square in the core. It exploded, but the other 2 kept coming. Ceres suddenly raised her hand. A wave of silver energy pulsed outward. The second drone malfunctioned midair, its systems shutting down as it crashed into the rocks below. Elias took the opportunity to shoot the last one, blowing it apart. Panting, he turned to Ceres. "I'm gonna need an explanation for that." Ceres gave him a small, tired smile. "Later. Let's move. The ruins and the secret within." They ran into the ruins, the air thick with ancient dust. Strange carvings covered the walls, symbols Elias had never seen before. "What is this place?" he asked. Ceres placed a hand on the stone, a reminder of what was lost. Elias exhaled. "You're full of cryptic answers, you know that." She turned to him, her expression serious. "Because some truths are not easy to understand." Before Elias could respond, a deep rumbling sound echoed through the ruins. The walls began to shift. A massive stone slid open, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, bathed in a faint blue light, sat a strange device. The beacon. Ceres stepped forward, her fingers hovering over the ancient machine. But just as she was about to activate it, a voice echoed through the chamber. "You should not have come here." Elias spun around, his rifle raised. The shadows of the ruins moved, and from the darkness, something stepped forward. It wasn't a Xerx. It was something older, something waiting. And it had been watching them all along. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle, his heart pounding. The voice had come from the darkness, deep, ancient, and full of authority. Ceres stepped back from the beacon, her expression unreadable. "We do not seek to disturb this place. We only need the beacon." From the shadows, a massive figure emerged. It was tall, armored, its body covered in ancient markings that faintly glowed. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were 2 piercing white lights staring directly at them. Elias had seen many strange beings in his time as a soldier, but this was different. "You do not belong here," the figure rumbled. Elias lifted his weapon. "And what exactly are you?" The figure tilted its head slightly, as if studying him. "I am the guardian of this place. My duty is to ensure that what is buried here remains undisturbed." Cirrus exhaled slowly. "Guardian, we do not seek to take anything, only to send a message." The guardian's eyes flickered. "Your kind has forgotten much." Elias glanced at Cirrus. "Does he mean humans?" Cirrus didn't respond immediately. Then she whispered, "Yes, and more than you know." Elias sighed. "All right, enough with the riddles. Either help us or get out of the way." The guardian didn't move. Instead, it raised a massive arm, and suddenly, the ruins around them began to glow. Symbols on the walls shimmered with energy, and an eerie hum filled the chamber. Then, in an instant, a vision exploded into Elias's mind. The forgotten past. Elias wasn't in the ruins anymore. He saw a great war, long before the time of humans. He saw giant ships, powerful civilizations battling for survival. At the heart of it all was humanity, but not as they were now. Humans had once been far greater than they realized. Not just soldiers, but explorers, creators, masters of powerful technology. But something had happened. Something terrible. Elias saw flashes of destruction. A betrayal. A war so massive that it shattered entire worlds. The Xerx were there, but they had not always been the enemy. Then the final image struck him, the Guardian, standing before a group of powerful humans. They made a choice. They sealed away their knowledge, their past, their power, so that humanity could start over. The Guardian's voice echoed in Elias's mind. "Your kind was not meant to remain in the dark forever, but the Xerx seek to keep you blind." The vision snapped away. Elias stumbled back, gasping for breath. He felt as if his mind had been ripped open, forced to see something it was never meant to. He looked at Cirrus. She was calm, as if she had already known the truth. "You knew," Elias whispered. Cirrus met his gaze. "Yes, but now, you do too." The choice. Elias turned to the Guardian. "If you showed me this, it means you believe it's time for humanity to remember." The Guardian was silent for a moment. Then it said, "Perhaps, but knowledge comes with danger." Elias exhaled. "Yeah, tell me about it." Cirrus stepped forward. "We must activate the beacon. My people need to know what we have found." The Guardian studied her, then Elias. "And if I allow this, what will you do?" Elias didn't hesitate. "Fight back." The Guardian's glowing eyes flickered, as if considering his words. Then, after a long moment, it stepped aside. "You may activate the beacon," the Guardian said. "But be warned, the Xerx will not let this stand." Cirrus didn't wait. She moved to the beacon and pressed her hand against its surface. The device lit up, sending a pulse of energy into the sky. The message had been sent. But then, boom! The ground shook violently, and a deep explosion echoed through the ruins. Elias turned sharply, raising his rifle. "What now?" The Guardian's voice was grave. "They are coming." Elias gritted his teeth. The Xerx. They must have detected the beacon's signal. Cirrus looked at Elias. "We have to hold them off until my people arrive." Elias loaded his rifle, a determined fire in his eyes. "Then let's give them a fight they won't forget." Elias's breath came in quick, heavy gasps as he surveyed the ruins around him. The ground was still trembling from the shockwave of the explosion. The Xerx were coming, their ships descending through the thick jungle air. The faint hum of their engines echoed through the trees. Cirrus stood beside him, her expression hard, determined. "They're not far. We don't have much time." Elias tightened his grip on his rifle. He could already hear the sound of Xerx foot soldiers marching through the underbrush, their heavy boots crunching against the dry leaves. He had fought alongside soldiers before, but this was different. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something much bigger. The Guardian stood silently by the beacon, its glowing eyes still trained on the horizon. "You will need more than your weapons," it said, its deep voice reverberating in the chamber. Elias didn't take his eyes off the approaching threat. "You got any suggestions?" The Guardian didn't answer immediately. It merely looked at Cirrus, its gaze filled with an ancient wisdom. Power is not something to be wielded lightly. Cirrus nodded, her hand tightening around the edge of the stone altar that held the beacon. "I understand. But it's not just power I need. It's hope." Elias shot a quick glance at her. He didn't know exactly what she meant, but he didn't have time to ask. The Zyrex were getting closer. "We need to make our stand," Elias said, pulling his rifle up to his shoulder. He checked his ammo, feeling the weight of the situation settle heavily on his chest. Cirrus's hand moved to the small device at her side. She pressed a button, and the air around them seemed to hum with an unseen energy. The beacon glowed brighter. A sudden wave of warmth surged through the air. And for a moment, Elias thought he felt something powerful and ancient that seemed to rise from the very ground beneath them. Cirrus stepped back, eyes glowing faintly. "It's done. My people will be here soon." Elias nodded, but the sense of urgency didn't fade. The Zyrex were moments away from reaching the ruins, and he wasn't sure how long they could hold them off. The first wave. The first group of Zyrex soldiers emerged from the trees. There were at least 20 of them. They'd moved in perfect formation, their armored bodies reflecting the dull light of the rising sun. Their weapons were deadly, designed for close-quarters combat, as well as long-range sniping. Elias fired the first shot, his rifle crackling with energy as the round hit its mark. One of the Zyrex fell, but the others didn't hesitate. They raised their weapons, charging forward with terrifying precision. Cirrus raised her hands, her eyes glowing brighter now. The air around her rippled with energy, and a barrier of shimmering silver light appeared in front of them. The Zyrex fired, but the shots bounced off the barrier harmlessly. The soldiers paused for a moment, confused. It was enough for Elias to move. He ducked behind a large stone and returned fire. His shots rang true, taking out 2 more Zyrex soldiers in quick succession. But the Zyrex weren't backing down. They spread out and began to flank them, using the trees and rocks as cover. Elias looked over at Cirrus. "How long can you hold this up?" She didn't answer immediately. Her focus was entirely on the barrier, her face tense with concentration. "Not long. The barrier isn't meant for a sustained defense." Elias gritted his teeth. "Then we need to move." But just as he spoke, a loud roar filled the air. From above, the shadows of Zyrex warships loomed, their weapons trained on the ground below. They began to fire, sending bursts of plasma energy crashing down into the jungle. The entire landscape around them erupted in flames. The trees exploded into burning splinters, and the earth shook with each impact. "We're running out of time," Elias shouted. "The battle intensifies." The Zyrex soldiers weren't letting up. Elias fired again, taking down another soldier. But they were closing in. Too many. The enemy was too well organized. Cirrus's barrier began to flicker, weakening with each blast from the Zyrex warships. She staggered, her face pale from the strain. "Cirrus," Elias yelled. "I'm fine," she gasped, though her voice was strained. She didn't seem fine at all. The barrier wavered, flickering like a dying flame. Boom! Another explosion rocked the area, knocking Elias off his feet. He scrambled to regain his balance, his rifle still in his hands. He fired several shots, but it wasn't enough. The Zyrex were closing in, flanking them from all sides. Elias's mind raced. There had to be something, some way to turn the tide. Then he saw it. The Guardian had moved. It stood tall, its ancient armor glowing brightly, and it raised its hand toward the sky. A deep, resonating sound filled the air, like the thrum of a massive heartbeat. The ground beneath them seemed to vibrate, and the sky darkened, as if the very atmosphere was being pulled into the ruins. A massive pulse of energy shot out from the ruins, a wave of raw power that seemed to shatter the very fabric of the air itself. The Zyrex soldiers were thrown backward, their bodies slammed against the earth. Their warships above were momentarily knocked off course, tumbling out of formation. Elias's eyes widened. "What is that?" Cirrus whispered, her voice barely audible. "The truth. This is the power that humanity once had. It has been locked away for centuries." The Guardian's voice echoed through the ruins. "You are not the first to wield this power, but you are the first to awaken it." The Zyrex were not done. But now, with the Guardian's power unleashed, the battle was far from over. The air around Elias crackled with energy as the pulse of raw power surged through the ruins. The Zyrex soldiers were thrown back, their bodies slamming against trees and boulders, their weapons discharging wildly into the sky. The warships above faltered, their precision thrown off by the force of the blast. For a brief moment, there was silence. The jungle had fallen still. The once dominant sound of the Zyrex assault was replaced by the low hum of the Guardian's power. Elias blinked, stunned by what he had just witnessed. He had seen powerful weapons before, but nothing like this. The Guardian had unleashed something ancient, something more powerful than anything the Zyrex or humanity could have imagined. But even with this newfound power, Elias knew they couldn't afford to relax. The Zyrex would regroup, and they would come again. The fight wasn't over. He turned to Cirrus, who was still on her feet, though pale and exhausted. "How long will this hold them off?" Cirrus shook her head, sweat glistening on her brow. "Not long. This power is not meant for such a battle. It's meant for something greater." Elias felt a tightness in his chest. "What do you mean?" Before Cirrus could respond, the ground shook again. The Zyrex were coming back. Their warships reformed, descending lower, their guns targeting the ruins once more. On the ground, the remaining soldiers were regrouping. They had taken a hit, but they weren't out of the fight yet. Elias exhaled sharply. "We don't have much time." Cirrus stepped toward the Guardian, her eyes fixed on the ancient being. "We need to awaken humanity's legacy. Only then can we fight back." The Guardian's voice rumbled in response. "You seek power, but power is not the key. The key lies in what was lost." Cirrus nodded. "I understand." She turned to Elias. "The Zyrex are here because they fear what humanity once was. We need to unlock that fear. We need to unlock our true potential." Elias was no stranger to fighting for survival, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. They weren't just fighting for the present. They were fighting for the future of all humanity. "Then let's do it," Elias said. "We can't waste any more time." The awakening. Cirrus stepped forward, placing her hands on the stone altar once more. The beacon was still glowing, pulsating with energy. She closed her eyes, her lips moving in soft, ancient words. The symbols on the walls began to glow again, brighter this time, filling the chamber with an eerie, radiant light. Elias felt the air around him shift. It was as if the very world was holding its breath. The power of the Guardian and the beacon were merging, connecting with something deeper, something buried within the ruins. Elias could almost feel it, a force greater than anything he had ever experienced. Suddenly, the earth beneath their feet trembled. A rumble echoed through the jungle, followed by a low, grinding sound. The ruins began to shift, stones moving as if alive, revealing more of the ancient technology hidden beneath. The sky above them darkened, as if responding to the growing energy. The Zyrex warships, once poised for attack, paused in midair. Something had changed. They were now uncertain. Elias could see it in their eyes. The Zyrex feared this. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the beacon. For a moment, everything was pure white, blinding. And then, as the light faded, Elias felt the world around him change. The power of the ruins had awakened something, something that hadn't been seen for centuries. The old technology was now alive, connecting with the forces of nature itself. The Guardian stepped forward, its armor glowing brighter, and the ground beneath them began to rise. Elias stared in awe as massive pillars of stone emerged from the earth, forming an intricate network of bridges, towers, and walls. The ruins were becoming a fortress, stronger and more alive than before. Humanity's legacy is not just in the weapons they wield, the Guardian said, its voice now resonating with a new powerful tone. It lies in their ability to reshape the world itself. Elias understood now. The Zyrex hadn't just feared humanity's strength, they feared their potential for creation, for building, for changing the course of the world. And now, humanity had the chance to rise once more. The final push. The Zyrex warships had regained their composure. They weren't retreating. They were attacking in full force. Their weapons charged, and their ships opened fire, sending streams of plasma down toward the new fortress. Elias snapped into action, raising his rifle. He fired at the approaching soldiers, taking down one after another, but it wasn't enough. The Zyrex were relentless. But now, with the fortress rising around them, the power of humanity's lost legacy had truly awakened. The walls of the fortress shifted, firing beams of energy that ripped through the air, striking down the Zyrex warships in seconds. The energy beams were not like anything Elias had ever seen. They were pure, concentrated power, as if the very world itself had come to life to protect them. Ceres stood at the heart of the ruins, her eyes glowing with the power she had unlocked. "It's time," she whispered. With one final command, the entire fortress came to life, sending a shockwave of energy through the battlefield. The Zyrex soldiers faltered, and for the first time, they were not the ones in control. Elias watched in awe as the Zyrex were pushed back, their warships falling from the sky, their soldiers retreating into the jungle. The power of humanity's legacy had turned the tide. The Zyrex could no longer win. For the first time in centuries, the balance of power had shifted. Humanity was no longer a forgotten species. They had awakened, and the future was now in their hands. Ceres turned to Elias, a faint smile on her lips. "We did it." Elias nodded, his heart still racing from the battle. "We've only just begun."